Let me tell you the story behind a photograph, a story that inspired legendary films. That even sparked ideas for Grand Theft Auto 6. You know, the couple that romantic lovers compare themselves to when they say, "We were like Bonnie and Clyde." Well, this is their story, but let's be clear from the start. This isn't a romanticized version. This is a video about their short lives filled with crime and harsh reality. Enjoy the video. And yeah, I know this reminder is annoying, but if you enjoy it, please don't forget to like the video. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, starting in the US and spreading across the globe, people were left completely penniless. Bartering became common as cash lost its power. Unemployment soared at an unimaginable rate, especially affecting the lower class, leaving them not just homeless, but starving. Poverty, immorality, and violence spread like wildfire. And in the shadows of this dark era, one of history's most infamous couples would emerge. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker was born on October 1st, 1910. Tragedy struck early with the death of her father, forcing the family to move into the slums of West Dallas. She started school, but this outspoken, attention-grabbing, stubborn girl didn't last long in the education system. After multiple fights and behaviors considered outrageous for a woman of that time, Bonnie dropped out. At just 15, she married her first love, Roy Thornton. But Roy constantly got involved in criminal activity and neglected his wife, eventually driving Bonnie to her limit. By 1929, at age 19, Bonnie left him. Though she never legally divorced, she mentally ended the marriage. She moved in with her mother and began working as a waitress. Then she met him. Clyde Barrow, born March 24, 1909, in East Texas, came from a poor family. Neglected and raised on movies glorifying outlaws, his family eventually moved to West Dallas, another struggling neighborhood. So broke that they had to sleep under their wagon when they arrived. Clyde was a neglected kid, and by 15 or 16, he could have gone down a better path, if life had offered it. But when his older brother Buck, already involved in illegal activities, took him under his wing, Clyde's fate was sealed. He started with petty theft, then moved on to safe-cracking, store robberies, and car theft. He quickly surpassed his brother in crime. By 1930, fate introduced him to Bonnie. In January of that year, 20-year-old Clyde Barrow met 19-year-old Bonnie Parker at a friend's house. Though still legally married, Bonnie had long moved on, and her husband was in prison. So it didn't take much for a passionate connection to spark between these two rebellious souls. But their budding romance was cut short when Clyde was arrested for car theft and robbery. Bonnie, fiercely loyal, smuggled a gun into the jail and helped him escape from McLennan County Jail, briefly. This was their first known crime together. From that point on, nothing would ever be the same. Clyde was soon recaptured and sentenced to 14 years in prison. Bonnie was once again alone with yet another troublemaker for a boyfriend. But prison didn't break Clyde. It transformed him. He was forced into hard labor and suffered abuse, both psychological and physical, from older inmates. One day, pushed past his limits, he struck and killed another prisoner with a metal pipe. A fellow inmate serving life took the blame to protect him. Still, Clyde remained behind bars. Desperate to escape either prison or the grueling labor, he severed two of his toes. He didn't know that his mother was already working hard to get him on parole. Eventually, her plea was accepted, and after 2 years, Clyde was released in February 1932. But prison had changed him. Now he was angry, full of rage toward the system, even if the true cause of that rage lay in the horrors he experienced behind bars. Once out, he reunited with Bonnie, and it didn't take long for her, clearly open to this lifestyle, to join him in the world of crime. Together, they founded the Barrow Gang, bringing in new members with their own criminal records. Under Clyde's guidance, Bonnie quickly learned the ropes of gangster life. But the story was just beginning. 2 months later, in April, Bonnie and gang member Ralph Foltz were arrested during a failed hardware store robbery. Ralph was convicted, but after 3 months, Bonnie somehow walked free. Meanwhile, Clyde and the rest of the gang killed a jeweler named John Bucker, adding murder to their growing rap sheet. They committed multiple robberies but never stole large amounts. Then in August, things escalated. In a shootout, a sheriff was wounded and a deputy was killed. Now, law enforcement was officially in their crosshairs. Later, Clyde's brother Buck and his wife Blanche joined the gang, turning their already violent acts into full-blown mayhem. Were they making good money? Not really. But they committed massive bloodshed for small scores. Instead of keeping things quiet, they made noise, loud, reckless, bloody noise. And all of this chaos happened not over years, but within just a few months. By April 1933, during a shootout in Joplin, Missouri, the gang's infamy exploded, thanks to the newspapers. A neighbor had tipped off the police, who stormed their hideout. Though the gang escaped, they left behind a treasure trove. Weapons, ammunition, personal belongings, photos, and even poetry. Photos were developed showing Bonnie and Clyde posing with guns, often in front of cars. Bonnie had even written poems, one of which included the haunting line, "Someday they'll bury us side by side." A chilling prophecy. The newspapers published the photos and poem on their front pages. Overnight, the criminal couple became national sensations. On June 23rd, during a market robbery, Clyde and gang member William Jones were caught in the act by Sheriff Henry Humphrey and Deputy Ansel. A shootout followed. Sheriff Humphrey was fatally shot. Bonnie and Clyde escaped yet again. By July, barely a year and a half since the gang was formed, they were hiding at the Red Crown Tavern in Missouri. Trying to stay low profile, they taped newspapers over the windows. That, plus their frequent supply runs, made neighbors suspicious. When police raided the place, another gunfight broke out. A stray bullet hit the car horn, making it blare non-stop. Police mistook it as a ceasefire signal and hesitated. The gang used the confusion to flee, though Buck was severely wounded, and Blanche's eye was permanently damaged by glass fragments. They escaped to Dexter, Iowa, and hid in a park for 5 days. Buck was in critical condition. 2 members took daily risks, venturing into town for food and medicine. To avoid suspicion, they kept their car engines running in parking spots, ironically drawing even more attention. And once again, a neighbor reported them to the police. But this time, the police showed up with nearly 50 lawmen, and during the shootout, as Clyde Parker and John tried to flee on foot, Buck, already wounded, was shot in the back. His wife Blanche was captured and arrested, and Buck, despite undergoing surgery, would die 5 days later. But the gang? They had no intention of stopping. On their way, they committed more robberies. And by January 1934, Bonnie and Clyde had reached Texas. There, they did something unthinkable. They raided a prison. Yes, you heard that right. A full-on prison raid. They helped several inmates escape. As if robberies weren't enough, they were now reinforcing their gang. One of the escapees, a convict named Henry Methvin, joined them in their criminal rampage. But for Bonnie and Clyde, this new addition would soon bring disaster. After the prison break, the government was furious and finally determined to put an end to this madness. It had been less than 2 years since the Barrow gang was formed, and Bonnie and Clyde, still seen by some as romantic outlaws, kept playing their dangerous game. Sheriffs, patrol officers, even innocent civilians. Their list of victims grew longer with each passing day. The authorities had had enough. A retired Texas Ranger captain named Frank Hamer was brought in to lead the manhunt. And Frank Hamer? He was as tough as they come. The Barrow gang was about to run into a force even stronger than themselves, though they didn't know it yet. Hamer was relentless. He tracked them day and night, followed every lead, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. In April 1934, a team made up of FBI agents, local lawmen, and Frank Hamer himself received a crucial tip. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow were hiding near New Orleans. It turned out the family of Henry Methvin, the convict they helped escape, lived in that area. The authorities soon contacted Henry's father and made him an offer. If he helped them, his son's crimes would be pardoned. It was a dangerous deal, but the father agreed. A month later, on May 23, 1934, A 6-man law enforcement team prepared an ambush. On a road in Louisiana, Henry Methvin's father parked his truck along the side, right where the gang was expected to pass. The officers hid in the bushes nearby. The father became the bait to save his son. Eventually, the couple arrived, roaring down the road in a stolen Ford V8. Just as the officers had hoped, Bonnie and Clyde noticed the man on the roadside. They slowed the car, thinking he needed help. And then, the trap was sprung. The officers opened fire with everything they had. Clyde Barrow was killed instantly. Bonnie screamed when she saw him fall, but the gunfire didn't stop. By the time the dust had settled, their car had been riddled with over 130 bullets. Just like that, their story ended. Clyde Barrow was only 24 years old. Bonnie Parker, just 23. Official reports said Bonnie was shot 26 times and Clyde 17 times. But modern research suggests each of them was hit over 50 times. They were finally caught, yes. But thanks to the haunting photos left behind and the myths spun by the media, Bonnie and Clyde quickly became the stuff of dark legend. Was there any real romance in their crimes? No, they were cold-blooded. But you know how society works. Even today, people forget a person is a criminal if the story is wrapped in just enough romance. And that's how, despite everything they did in just 2 short years, Bonnie and Clyde became legendary. Their love, their photos, their wild spree, all immortalized in film, music, and books. They claimed they were fighting for justice, but they became icons of injustice. And in the end, just as Bonnie had written in her poem, they sank together, buried side by side